So we just finished off by creating our reducers and our action types, and now it's time to create our store. So remember, we have to create our store by passing in our reducer. We can't call create store without passing in a function. So first, we're going to import our root reducer from /reducers. Same as reducer/index, we've seen that before. We're also going to import a few things from the Redux library: create store, apply middleware, and compose. And these are from Redux. Now, compose is going to allow us to combine functions together. This is going to be useful for the second parameter of create store, and apply middleware is going to be very useful for any kind of middleware that we want. Specifically, we want the thunk middleware. This is going to come in from Redux thunk. This will allow us to delay the evaluation of some expression, and is essential for working with asynchronous code in Redux. There are other libraries to do this, but I think thunk is the easiest to get up and running with. So we're now going to export a function. We can call this configure store. And it's going to make a store, which is the result of the create store function that we brought in from Redux. First parameter is always some kind of function or a reducer. So let's pass in our root reducer. As a second parameter, we're going to enhance this store. We'll pass in some middleware. Well, we're going to compose two pieces of middleware together. We're going to first pass in apply middleware and pass in thunk. We're also going to pass in the ability to debug using the Redux DevTools. So what's that going to look like? This is usually some code that you'll copy and I'll link to in the section notes. But we'll type in window.devtools.extension. And you can see why we're going to want to copy and paste because I'm already making typos. If that exists, we'll go with window.devtools.extension and call that. Otherwise, we'll just make a function and call that. So once again, this is code that you'll copy and I'll link to in the section notes, but this is going to be really useful for debugging our application in the Redux DevTools. Finally, let's just return that store. So we simply brought in our root reducer, brought in some Redux tools and middleware, and we brought in the thunk middleware. So once we configured our store, we're in pretty good shape from a Redux standpoint. We're not going to worry about dispatch, any kind of actions, or getting to our reducers. We're just going to do some setup so that we can actually create a store and pass that in to our app.js. So let's head over to our app.js, and what we'll do here is take out some of that logo and CSS stuff, and let's take out actually most of this HTML here. What we're really going to do is first import a couple things. Let's import the provider component that comes from React Redux. We need that provider component so we can wrap our entire application using the Redux store. We'll also import the configure store function, and that came from /store. So what are we going to do with this provider? Well, let's make sure that we first create the store. So we'll call configure store, and we'll then, inside of our application, pass in that store. So we can actually make this a stateless functional component, and we'll create a variable called app, which is going to be a function. And here we'll return our provider component. And that provider component always accepts a prop called store. So we'll pass in a prop of store, and its value is the store that we created on line 5. So we'll just make a div as a bit of a placeholder before we put in some additional components. So the next thing we want to configure is the React router. So let's import browser router, and we'll alias that as router. You'll see this commonly done from React router DOM. We're going to add the router so that we can navigate from page to page and have a really nice client-side router. So what do we do with the provider? Well, inside of the provider, we're going to pass in our router. The router component is going to be wrapped by the provider component. So here we'll place a div, and inside of this div, we'll place in the string hello world. We'll keep it real simple. We have the provider, the router, and a simple div that says hello world. Let's try to run our application. And let's see, we might have some errors, and it's a great time to debug them. So if we go to localhost 3000, let's see what we get. And it looks like we're getting an error, failed to compile, cannot resolve /app. So let's go back to our index.js. And this refers to the application that starts our entire application. And that's because it can't find app. Remember, we placed app inside of /containers. /app. If we take a look at this right now, we're going to get another error, cannot resolve React, in our components file. Let's make sure that we've actually npm installed to make sure that we include React and React DOM. We have all these other modules, but we just forgot to install React and React DOM. Always have to make sure that once you use create React app, you npm install. I got too excited to build this. I forgot to npm install. That's okay, this happens. So let's start again and let's see what we have. And it looks like we have our hello world. Great. What I also want to take a look at are these Redux dev tools. So it looks like we configured our store correctly. We have a current user with is authenticated. We also have an errors key as well with a message of null. We're going to be using these dev tools quite a bit to see changes to our state and make sure that we're dispatching actions correctly. So that was all configured where we created and configured our store. So that happened inside of our index.js, where we configured our store and passed in that window.devtools extension. You also have to make sure that you install that Chrome extension. You can use it in Firefox as well, I believe, but I'm just using Chrome right now. So we've set up a very small app.js, connects to our Redux store. It uses the React router. And now we're going to start including some components that allow for routing as well as a simple navbar.